record, and I'm going to mute all background noise. If you'd like to share, ask, whatever, please do. Just need to unmute yourselves first. Okay. So we're working our way through the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, the third book of the Torah. And today we're going to be starting the third of the Torah portions. And whereas the first two Torah portions were almost exclusively focused on offerings, services, things that really are very powerfully important, but things that we don't do. And so we have, by definition, if I can show you a matzah and tell you what to do, it's different than talking about something kind of abstract that you've never seen and may even sound a little in concept, foreign to our thinking. So and that takes up a lot of this third book of the Torah. And the first two Torah portions were a good sampling of that. This next Torah portion has a little bit of that, but then it goes into more of a narrative of something that somewhat dramatic that went on in the tabernacle. And then towards the end of the Torah portion, it goes into the laws of kosher species. So it's more varied. It's going to be a little bit more along the lines of what we studied in the first book and a half of the Torah, in that sense. Now, to be able to get into where we are now, because this is the third Torah portion, and there is a sequence where this connects to the first two Torah portions we read. As a matter of fact, the Torah begins, it says, this was on the 8th day. 8th day what? At the end of last Torah portion, we spoke about 7 days of inaugurating the temple and the Kohen. So it opens up with very much a connection where it's capping off what we read in the last Torah portion. So I want to give a little bit more of context and talk about what this 8th day is and where we're launching from in this Torah portion. As I mentioned several times, just to give us some historical context, because the Torah does have historical framing, even though it's not a history book. From the second book of the Torah on, you have the Jews either enslaved in Egypt, which is a very short amount, and then being liberated in Egypt, which takes us through the first 3-4 Torah portions. They leave Egypt. They go to Sinai 7 weeks after they leave Egypt, and there God gives us the Torah at Mount Sinai. From that point, the Jews are at Mount Sinai for just about a year. They're camped there. A few million people camped there. Now, what goes on? The idea of coming out of Egypt was to go to Israel. Why are they seemingly stalled at Sinai? Because at Sinai, God spoke to them and then told Moses, come up the mountain for 40 days and I'm going to give you the depth and the breadth of Torah wisdom, which only Moses could absorb that in 40 days, the amount of divine wisdom. And then you'll come back down with tablets, which are just representative of that divine wisdom. And then conceivably, you'll move on to Israel. But as we have read here, when Moses came down the mountain, he saw that the Jews had panicked because they thought they miscalculated and they thought he was dead. And they created a golden calf. And there was a mob. And actually, even Moses' brother, and it is a little irrelevant to this Torah portion, Moses' brother, trying to stall them, said, great, let's make a party. Everybody take off go get your jewelry and your gold, and we'll put together, we'll make an idol, thinking that would take a long time because people are not going to want to give up their valuables, but they did. And it was very, very quick. And therefore, Moses' nephew, who resisted everything, he was killed. Aaron tried to delay them, steer them, knowing that Moses would be back. When Moses came down the mountain, he saw what had happened. He broke the tablets, and he begs forgiveness from God. And there is, after 40 days, God says he says, come up, talk about it. God gives him another chance. And on the first day of Elul, which is, we just celebrated on Sunday, the first day of Elul, because they got the Torah in, let's say, June. And now it's already approaching fall. And God tells them, I will give you a second tablets. Come up the mountain for another 40 days. He gets the second tablets. He comes down on Yom Kippur. That's 40 days later, first day of Elul to the 10th day of Tishrei. Once he comes down, there's forgiveness. God says to him, build a tabernacle. And this is where I'm going. The tabernacle, as we've discussed, is not just a building. It's a very holy building. It's a structure that is intrinsically, objectively, a building in which divinity is present and can be present, and that takes not only God, but us having a suitable place according to what God wants us to have. So the tabernacle is a suitable place for the divine. And he says, start building the tabernacle. This is after that first Yom Kippur in the desert. Now, I just want to pause here for a second, as we're getting close to, I want to build a case for where we're going in this new Torah portion we're beginning. I may have mentioned in the past that the Medrash tells us that with Adam and Eve, when God created the world, there was tremendous beauty, in the sense that there was a world which it was not pure divinity, it was tangible, and it seemed to have some type of thing of an independent existence. It was totally synchronized with divine will. So if there's a part of our bodies, we have our soul, our consciousness, our internal traffic controller. And you could say, well, that my pinky or my foot is not that, but if it's totally in sync with my soul, with my thinking, then I'm a whole human being. There's no fracture within me just because there's a head and there's a foot, but I'm one unit. And in the world, in the presence of God in the world, in that initial creation, even with Adam and Eve, while Adam and Eve had some sense of free choice, which they abused, but clearly there was independent consciousness. The presence and the aura of the world and the ambience of the world was all of oneness. God and God's world, and God's world that has a purpose. Once Adam and Eve chose to unplug from that oneness by making a choice that contradicted the oneness, God said that, told them that here is a specific specific fruit, and its purpose is to test your mettle, to test your discipline, and they say to themselves, it looks good, I'm going to eat it, and violate what God said. That's unplugging themselves from consciousness of what God wants from us and from the world. At that point, that very present divine consciousness withdrew. To some extent, God didn't withdraw from the world. God's part of the world, but the consciousness, the presence, the palpable presence withdrew. So when they looked at a tree, they didn't see God's purpose in the tree. They started to see just a tree, bark, fruits. The language in the Torah, after their mistake of unplugging from God's will by doing something they were not supposed to do, it says they heard God's voice, and almost like walking in the garden, but it's grammatically, it's a strange way of how the Torah puts it. And it sounds almost like what could work as like God skipping, like it wasn't smooth. And the Medrash tells him that was God like skipping upwards, God jumping up from pure presence, clear presence in the world, and taking a step up. Later on, there are more mistakes. There's Cain and Abel, and the Medrash counts 7 different human mistakes in which we were expelling, so to speak, divine consciousness. Okay, God is always part of the world. That's not up to us. But the sense of palpable connection is up to us. And we're a very important part of creating that. And when we turn our backs on God, it's like when you have 2 different people. They're in proximity to each other. But if one has the back turned to the other and is ignoring, that's a distance. It's not an actual distance because the person's right behind them, but there's no connectedness. And if we are turning our back on God in these 7 different ways at different times, we're deepening more and more the disconnect. Then the Medrash tells us, Abraham and Sarah had generations which were trying to pull the divine consciousness back into the world. And that culminated with Moses, who was the 7th. Now, it's not just Moses, it was Moses and how Moses affected it. How was Moses able to be a divine tool or have that function, that very special function of bringing divine consciousness back to the world? That, we're told, is through the tabernacle. Moses built the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is an emblem of a place of where God can reside in full glory, all pistons firing. There isn't the idea of the hiddenness. In Hebrew, the word for world is olam, which is grammatically or etymologically, it's related to the word for helam, hidden. Our world, its purpose and godliness is hidden, even though godliness is our spiritual DNA, it's our spiritual molecular flow. We're not aware of it, and you can't pick it up on a microscope. And it takes us to open ourselves up to that. And what the tabernacle gave us the opportunity, any one of us, if we were living at that time, if we walked into the tabernacle, there would be no questions at all, whether there's God, whether there's purpose, whether we're alive for a purpose, what our purpose is. There was this clear, unobstructed clarity in connection between the human and the divine. So in that sense, the creating the tabernacle was restoring the human divine connection that we originally had been gifted, with which we had originally been gifted at the beginning of creation. So now we're building the tabernacle. It takes a while. We're not sure when it was done. Some people say it was Hanukkah, maybe a little later. But God tells Moses, wait, I'll tell you when to have opening day. As they approach they're getting close to the first anniversary of their leaving Egypt. They left Egypt on the 15th day of Nisan, the Jewish month of Nisan, which is in the spring. So now they started building this thing the day after Yom Kippur. And now they're still in the Sinai Desert. And now they're approaching the first anniversary. And God tells Moses, say around Purim time, Purim is a month before Passover, God tells Moses, and Purim didn't exist at the time. I'm just trying to give a time context. God tells Moses, we're going to get ready now to open and use the tabernacle. It's a very special day, very special event. First thing is, I want you to go through an inauguration process. The inauguration process was for Moses to construct it and deconstruct it every day for a week. Now, that's 7 days. And part of what that represented was the 7 levels of constructing our perfect relationship with God, and the fact that it was deconstructed. And here, this tabernacle is the 7 days is undoing the damage of many generations of distancing from God, and bringing God down those back into reality and into a palpable presence for 7 days. Those 7 levels, we say that God, at least to our palpable, our senses, God receded. And this is going to be, he's building the tabernacle 7 days. Build, then take it apart, build it again. Take it apart, build it again. To show this is something we are building. It's not just him, it's for the Jewish people to understand that we are creating within the world and within our lives a sanctuary for the divine. To be able to reach back to a much more ideal and idealistic place that we lost in the beginning with Adam and Eve. So for 7 days they do that, and at the end of the last Torah portion, we're told that part of that was to inaugurate also the Kohens, to be able to serve, to help, to facilitate the connection between God and the people. So now, after 7 days have been done, the 8th day is going to be opening day in the temple, in the tabernacle, which is amazing. And one of the things that we will read about, once they started with the services, then there was, I guess you can call it inaugural services. The heads of each tribe came. It was a very, very big deal. That's the 7 days brought them up to the first day of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of a Jewish month. And so the beginning of the month of Nisan, which is the month of Passover, that is the day they were able to open the tabernacle. That should start. And the idea was, as we'll see, they were able to physically see. There was a cloud would settle on it, but they were able to physically see and sense that there was divine presence that came to this building that wasn't there the 7 days before when it was going up and down, when it was being built, constructed and deconstructed. That was preparation, but now this was victory. And the Medrash indeed tells us that the God's joy on the day when the tabernacle was inaugurated, which is the first day of Nisan, but we're calling the 8th day. It's 8th day, meaning it's after 7 days of Moses' preparation. So we say on the 8th day, that 8th day of the preparation continuum, which is the first day of Nisan, was such a joy to God, like the creation of the world. A joy commensurate to God's joy at the creation of the world. Which, based on how I just explained it, I hope we understand why the Medrash is comparing the creation of the tabernacle to the creation of the world. Because at the creation of the world, there was such joy of God and having oneness with a seemingly independent existence, that joy was short-lived. And now, with the tabernacle, God would again be able to have that joy of total oneness with a physical reality. So this is a very, very big deal. Now, somewhat as an aside, is to mention, because things, we'll talk about this around the edges a little bit as we go. Once Moses finishes preparing, God turns to Aaron. Now Aaron is the star of the show. Now, they're brothers. Aaron's the older brother. Moses is clearly Moses. But Aaron had some advantages too. Each one had their strength. And we say that Aaron was more of a people person. Moses had a speech impediment. Aaron was a person very connected to regular people on Main Street and in how their struggles and how they live their lives. Aaron had the advantage of also experiencing repentance, because he felt very, very mortified that he had been part of the building the golden calf, even though his intentions were pure, and God knew his intentions were pure, and he wasn't rebuked for it. But here he knew that somehow, just the way the ball had bounced, he ended up being an unwitting participant and facilitator for building the golden calf. And he kept digging deep into himself to try and strengthen his relationship with God, seeing himself as having slipped. There's a real beauty to that, over the perhaps more calm and the relationship that Moses had, and the idea of what we might call a Baal Teshuvah, someone refinding a connection with God. That also gave him an advantage in the beauty of his experience over Moses. There's something else too that the Mendy tells us, which is that all the way back in Egypt, the Jews are suffering for centuries. Moses has been raised by Pharaoh's daughter. He recognizes that he is a Jew, what his fellow Jews are going through, and he stands up for them. And his adoptive grandfather, Pharaoh, wants to kill him. He flees Egypt, goes to a place called Midian. He marries there, and he settles in as a shepherd. When he's there as a shepherd, he's shepherding his flock, as we read many, many months ago or years ago. He comes to a mountain, and there he sees a burning bush, and God speaks to him through the burning bush and says, "Go back to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go." That's how really the whole liberation begins. The whole Passover liberation begins with God communicating to Moses there. Moses is the shepherd. Now, what you can see in scripture is that Moses says, "Not me. I don't speak well. I have a speech impediment. God, it sounds great. Send someone else." He says that's clearly in the scripture. And then God says to him, "Who do you think gives power of speech?" He said, why do you think, if I'm telling you that I can work through you and your personality, trust me. I can be present in your speech, in your life. You'll be effective. The Medrash tells us that Moses resisted for 7 days. And ultimately, he relented, he acquiesced. But the Medrash also, points and says here that God pointed this out to him. It said, you way back for 7 days, you doubted me, doubted my ability to be able to be present in your human life. You said, I'm giving you a job. And you're saying, great, but I can't do it. It means you don't get my presence in the world. And actually that's why God said, okay, but Aaron will be your spokesman. Aaron didn't resist. So God reminds him now with the tabernacle, which represents God's presence in the physical world. It says, for 7 days, you resisted me, I'm going to have you go through, you will have the honor of building, deconstructing the tabernacle to show how my presence is coming into the world in a palpable way. And it will be in a palpable way in the physical structure and within physical human beings. But once those 7 days are over, and we've also replayed, and we're trying to revisit the 7 days when you denied that ability. Now you'll stand to the side, and we're going to go to Aaron, like we did back then. Aaron's going to be the one who's truly going to be the maestro of bringing that holiness. He will have the honor of bringing that holiness to a palpable way within the tabernacle, within the lives of the people, because where history is, in a sense, repeating itself. That he accepted my ability to be present in his personality. He fought it for 7 days, and here he will be the one to be able to trigger it. And you'll have 7 days of preparing for it because you're a good guy, you're Moses. Okay, so now let's get started with the overview. The Torah portion called Shemini, and Shemini means the eighth. Shmona means 8. Shmini means 8th. In other words, there were 7 prior. Now, so on page 57, I guess. Yeah, 57. Like the preceding parasha, Tzav, which is the one we just finished, Parashat Shmini covers 2 main subjects that appear to be unrelated. First half of the parasha is historical. The account of the 8th and final day of the inauguration rites of the tabernacle, which was the culmination of the 7 preceding days prescribed in the second half of Parashat Tzav. By the way, I'm going to ask you, would it be easier for you if I brought this text up on a split screen? And I never even thought about it. I do it on Sundays. You just let me know later, whatever. It shouldn't be difficult at all. The account of the 8th and final day of the inauguration rites of the tabernacle, which is the culmination of the 7 preceding days described in the second half of Parashat Tzav. The second half of the parasha is legal. Now, I said that there's also drama. They're not bringing it here, but there is drama. It's not as full of technicalities as the first 2 Torah portions were. Second half of the parasha is legal. Which animals are permitted or forbidden for consumption? The basis of the laws of kashrut and the laws of ritual impurity and defilement imparted by contact with forbidden animals. Okay. This seems to be disconnected. So why are these 2 seemingly unrelated subjects treated in the same parasha? And why is the description of the 8th day of the inauguration rite separated artificially, it would seem, from that of the preceding 7 days? God could have just finished off. He said 7 days, and then whatever's going on here. Or just say on the first day of Nisan, this is what happened. Calling it an 8th day is underscoring that there's a connection between the days. what went on last week's Torah portion, the last Torah portion, and this Torah portion. It is a continuation where it very easily could have been everything was prepared, and now Rosh Chodesh Nisan, opening day, and talk about what went on. The Torah goes out of its way to connect the two. And the answer to this question is alluded to in the name of this parsha, Shmini, which means eighth, referring, as we said, to the day following the 7 days of the inauguration of the tabernacle. The purpose of the tabernacle was to draw the awareness of God into the lives of humanity in general, and into the lives of the Jewish people in particular. This goal was not achieved until the 8th day of the inauguration rituals. It was only once the tabernacle started to work that the awareness kicked in. During the first 7 days, Moses erected and dismantled the tabernacle each day as God had instructed him to. Each day he offered all the sacrifices himself. Aaron and his sons were essentially passive during these rites as Moses dressed them and anointed them. Moses was running the show. But during these first 7 days of the tabernacle operation, the divine presence did not descend and reveal itself. No fire descended from heaven to consume the sacrifice. So Moses is running the show of preparation, but it's not working yet. There isn't the palpable holiness. There are no miracles. During the first 7 days, there's no open violation of the laws of nature, no miracle. Only on the 8th day did the tabernacle start working, so to speak. And Moses did not dismantle it. Aaron began officiating as high priest, and his sons as regular priests, and most importantly, in the presence of the entire nation, divine fire miraculously descended on the altar for the first time to consume the sacrifices. So that's going to happen in this Torah portion, and that's drama. So this is, until now, has been discussions of what will be when we have a tabernacle. And now we're talking about the actual tabernacle is going to be set up, it's going to start to work, and we're going to see these things. The fact that the revelation of God occurred only on the 8th day reflects the notion that the number 7 signifies the natural order, whereas the number 8 signifies the miraculous transcendence of natural order. So let's talk about that for a little. 8 days we have Hanukkah, 8 days we have Bris, but 7 days is much more of a common idea. I just said 7 levels in spirituality where God went or came down. We find a lot in the Kabbalah with 7. There are 7 days of the week. Shabbos is the 7th day of the week. But the idea, let's talk about Shabbos for a second. Shabbos is our physical world in sync. We approach on Shabbos, we see the world, we should see the world, we should approach the world because the reality is of the world is the world in a more perfect form. Without all the fracture. And every Friday night it's only single Chadodi. It's this idea, it's almost in each of the stanzas, whether it's talking about Jerusalem or talking about the Jewish people or talking about individuals, it's like the phoenix rising from the ashes. So the ashes are of the weak. There's a splinter in the weak. And now our best self comes out. There's synchronicity. Think about it in terms of space. We have 6 different directions. There's right, north, south, west, and east, up and down. That's great. That's reality. But if you're being pulled in all different directions, it's not great, because the directions symbolizes the idea of fracture or frazzle or multiplicity, which can be a challenge to synchronicity and oneness. So that's 6 days of the week. What is Shabbos? Shabbos is a point in the middle, synchronizing everything. If you're drawing lines, north, south, east, and west, up and down, and then there's a point in the middle, a hub, which it centralizes and coordinates and synchronizes all of the 6 different directions, that 7th element is our physical world at its best. Synchronized, balanced, focused. That's what Shabbos is. Our physical world balanced. Talmud tells us that when Mashiach comes, says his harp will have 8 strings. Why 8? 7 is our thing. 7 is the consummate, the coordination and synchronicity of our world. The idea of Mashiach's harp having 8 strings, or Mashiach being represented by the number of 8, is that Mashiach will introduce into our physical world something that we really can't experience now. The presence of the divine in a palpable way. We can have life, physical life, in a way that works, that's synchronized, that's balanced. We can feel Hashem in our hearts. We can study. We can feel love for each other. We can feel connectedness. We can feel balance. We can feel godliness. But the presence of God is never going to be as palpable as a can of soda. It's you can't deny this. And the feelings can sometimes be transitory. We're human beings with ups and downs. So as great as Shabbos is 25 hours, and we go back to the week. And even on Shabbos, the beauty of what we can experience, and it's real, it's not as tangible and as palpable as what we call our normal human life. And when Mashiach comes, the presence of God will be as tangible and as undeniable and as seeable and hearable and as breathable as anything we consider normal in our normal sensory perception. We don't have God sensors. We can hear, we can see, we can smell, we can touch. All those things are not God. We feel God. But our senses will be able to, our actual human senses will be able to sense, be able to feel the electricity of connecting with godliness. That is otherworldly, and that's what 8 represents. The idea of godliness being present within human life. So 8 in Torah mysticism and Jewish philosophy, it represents something that's beyond the natural. The natural has its perfect state, but then there's beyond the natural, being able to bring that in. And that reflects, actually, it's reflected in the Bris and Hanukkah also, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. Now, in the tabernacle, that's what it was. Tabernacle was that it was not just a perfectly synchronized idea of humanity and normal human life. No, the most brilliant human could not have created the tabernacle. They could have built it, but the tabernacle wasn't just about the art. The tabernacle was a place where God was palpable, and that's beyond Shabbos. That's where godliness coming in a very tangible way. So, the fact that the revelation of God occurred only on the 8th day reflects the notion that the number 7 signifies the natural order, whereas the number 8 signifies the miraculous transcendence of natural order. For example, the world, which was designed to function according to the laws of nature, was created in 7 days. 7 days of the week, 7 days span of the holidays, most of our Pesach, 7 days, Sukkot is 7 days. It's within our world being connected, finally connected. It's the 7 years of the sabbatical cycle. Right? We have 7 years that is a Shemitah. the 7 sabbatical cycles in page 58. In each Jubilee period, all reflect the natural order of creation onto which we are bidden to infuse divine consciousness. Number 8, in contrast, is associated with the notion of surpassing the bounds of nature. Every male Jewish child is initiated into the covenant through circumcision on the 8th day following his birth, signifying the power granted to him to overcome his body's natural drives. So there's something special, and this is obviously into each and every one of us. The Talmud tells us that this gift, this spiritual gift of the bris, something that women have from birth. That's what Talmud tells us, and within boys, it is symbolized after 8 days by this idea that was originally given to Abraham of actually bring this into his body. And if you think about it, the day following the 7 days of Sukkot, every year we have Sukkot. The 8th day it's interesting, is a separate holiday. It's called Shmini Atzeres. It's not Sukkot. We don't eat in a sukkah. We're not supposed to eat in a sukkah. I mean, you can eat in the sukkah, but it's not. We can't make a blessing in the sukkah. And the idea of the 8th day is, while it's a distinct holiday, and in our literature we call it a distinct holiday, not Sukkot. But it's funny that in what we call it is the 8th day. Well, it's the 8th day of what? It seems to be the 8th day of Sukkot. So it's similar to this. It's connected to the prior week, but it's at a different level. We call it the 8th day. Following the day following 7 days of Sukkot, the holiday of Shmini Atzeres, which means the 8th day, we should be held back to be with God in days when people would go to Jerusalem for the holiday of Sukkot. And it says stay in 8th day because there's a special time of unity with God. It takes the theme and lessons of Sukkot, which celebrate the brotherhood of all humanity, and focuses them on the Jewish people as a chosen nation that transcends the natural goals of human civilization by the 7 million divine consciousness. What they're mentioning here is that on Sukkot, there was a service of the offerings, and those offerings were us praying for the nations of the world. It was praying, offering, the turning to God, asking for protection for the Egyptians and the Assyrians and the Phoenicians and whoever it was who probably were oppressing us, but asking for God's mercy on them. So Sukkot is kind of a global brotherhood holiday. When that's done, those 7 days are done, God says, Shmini Atzeres is just me and you. This is a Jewish holiday. So it's part of the flow of Sukkot, but it's separate. Because we transcend the natural goals of human civilization, our job is not just to create a nice world, it's to bring divine consciousness to the world. The holiday of Hanukkah, which is the commemoration of the miraculous victory of light over darkness, is celebrated for 8 days. It doesn't explain why, but maybe we'll get the Hanukkah, we'll talk more about it. Nevertheless, although there's a quantum difference between 7 and 8, the fact that the 8th is called the 8th demonstrates that it is somehow a continuation of the preceding 7. That without the 7 unmiraculous days of inauguration, there cannot be a miraculous 8th day. This is because God made his miraculous intervention dependent upon us doing all that we can within the natural order to prepare for such a revelation. True, God's gesture of opening the gates to the unattainable is still considered an unearned divine gift rather than a reciprocal response to our efforts, since our efforts can in no way compare to God's supernatural response. Nevertheless, without our prior preparatory efforts, no supernatural revelation can take place. So in our relationship with God, we prepare ourselves for divine revelation. Without proper preparation, you're not going to get it. Someone is about to give you fine wine, you got to get a cup. We have to prepare our ground, or if you want to take it more than that, in order for us to ask for God's gift of crops, we've got to work the field. We got to prepare it. We got to plant, and then God hopefully will give us rain and a healthy season. But we got to do our work. That's the give and take between us and God always. So he says here, the ultimate transcendence of the natural order will occur in the Messianic future, even more than there was in the tabernacle. Thus, we are taught in the Messianic era. Here's what I mentioned before. If I realized it was there, we probably mentioned it yet. Temple's 7-stringed harp will be replaced by a harp of 8 strings, indicating that the miraculous revelations of the future will be the result of our preparations now during the era of natural order. So by using the 7 correctly, God will grant us the 8th. Nonetheless, the divine vision that we will experience in the Messianic era will surpass any that has ever occurred, even the prophetic revelations that the Jews experienced during the greatest spiritual moments of Jewish history. Splitting of the sea, the giving of the Torah, and yes, the revelation of divinity in the tabernacle, which first took place in the events described in this parsha, even in the first 2 temples. We've had periods when we had tremendous revelation, and they are engraved into our collective national memory. It's very, very special, and it's very important for us to remember that. But what we're looking for at the Mashiach is beyond all of that. For in all these cases, the divine revelation was indeed miraculous. It imposed itself from without the natural order of reality. The world has always been such where you look at the world, you see wood, you see plastic, you see people. You're not seeing godliness. That's not the way it works. In your mind's eye, if you've worked and you want to be able to see the godly potential and the beauty in different human beings, we can get that done. But to your eye, it's still you're looking at the person's eyes, nose, face, and you're, again, if God willing, we should be able to get to a place where our mind's eye sees differently, but then what we're doing is penetrating what our normal vision is and shifting what our normal vision is, or maybe even looking past what our normal vision is, because we're seeing goodness where it's not so visible. That's reality. So the divine revelations were imposed on the natural order of reality. It was not these spiritual pinnacles natural for the physical human eye to perceive divinity. The eyes of the Jews who beheld these revelations were no different than our eyes, which only see physicality and are blind to the spiritual spectrum. And the fact that they did see what they saw was therefore miraculous, overriding natural order. Right? I can't see the spectrum of light in a ray of sun. There's certain things I can't see, certain things I can't hear. That's natural. That's normal. It's not a bad thing. It's the reality God gave us. If we were all standing at the Red Sea of reeds, and we saw the divinity that was being revealed, then there would have been a divine gift that we're able to see something we couldn't ordinarily see. We are able to see the spectrum of light. We're able to see. All of a sudden, we're able to hear a dog whistle. I mean, it's God breaking the laws of nature and letting me give me that snapshot. But my eyes don't see that. They're not equipped for that. In Messianic, however, the nature of reality will change, and with it, the nature of the physical eye, its range of vision, will expand, enabling it to see godliness naturally. The truth of God's existence and God's continual creation of reality will become obvious. Human consciousness will be the inverse of what it is today. Today, materiality is obvious, and divinity, when we perceive it, seems anomalous. Say that was a holy moment. That was great. That was inspiring. But that normal life, when you wake up in the morning, is not. Life is not is very physical, and it left to its own devices, it's shallow. Finding God is finding a godly connection is the anomaly. But in the future, when Mashiach comes, divinity will be obvious in materiality. A realm of creation aware of itself and not of God will seem anomalous. We'll say, how could it be that we live in this world and we didn't see God? It's going to be hard to remember that. Thus, the Messianic era is the true blending of the 7th and 8th in the eighth. Nature, 7, will take on the properties of the supernatural eighth, and what was formerly supernatural will become natural. Okay, so now having said that, let's go to 59, second paragraph. This explains why the account of the eighth day of the installation rites is juxtaposed not with the account of the 7 days that preceded, but with the laws of permitted and forbidden animals and the defilement that the latter are part. We go from the sublime to animals, zoology. It is stated in the Mendy that one of the reasons God permitted us to eat certain animals and forbade us to eat others is in order to refine us. The basic refinement effected by observing these laws is the self-control we gain by submitting to limitations of what we eat. There is a spiritual value to us saying, I can't eat that because God doesn't want me to. Because I love God, and therefore I'm going to stay away from it. Like there would be something if we have a loving relationship and we're going to stay away from something out of loyalty to that relationship. It strengthens that muscle. From this perspective, there is nothing repugnant about the forbidden animals per se, physically or otherwise. Jewish people are told to refrain from eating them simply because God decreed that they should not. Yeah, right? The animals are nice, they're cute, they're nice, whatever it is, I can't eat it. It's not a moral judgment. God's division of the animal kingdom into the permitted and the forbidden, decreeing that certain animals defile us spiritually if we consume them, defile us ritually if we touch or carry them, automatically creates a part of creation that potentially opposes divinity. The world itself, in contrast, makes no distinction between kosher and non-kosher animals. All types of creatures form a necessary integral part of the natural ecological order. By determining which animals are permitted, meaning conducive to divine consciousness, and which are forbidden, meaning antithetical to divine consciousness, the Torah transforms the world's naturally undifferentiated assortment of animals into a school for human refinement. In so doing, it makes the natural world supernatural. The 7th world becomes an expression of the divine eighth. The world has an animal kingdom. Part of that animal kingdom, for example, is a pig. A pig is not immoral. A pig's a pig. Exactly as God created the pig. So, on the human level, it's all animals. Some animals that I may be afraid of, some animals not. But as far as, and even them, even if I'm afraid of them, doesn't mean that they have a moral problem. They're not choosing to be animals of prey. When God says, go into this world and use divine wisdom to distinguish, this is for you and that's not for you. What I'm doing is, what we're doing is bring otherworldly consciousness into a world. The idea of explaining rationally why we can eat from a cow and not from a pig, people will try different things, but it's really kind of avoiding the point. Who says it has to be rational? God says, though, don't eat it. And that is bringing the supernatural into our decisions. In this light, we can understand why the account of the 8th day of the installation rites of the tabernacle is paired with the laws of kashrut and purity rather than with the account of the preceding 7 days. Both of these, the account of the events of the 8th day and the laws following it, are expressions of true purpose of creation, the revelation of supernatural divine consciousness within the natural physical world. This 8th day was not like the 7 days. 7 days was preparation. There was no infusion yet of supernatural divine consciousness. Opening day, we saw it. That's a huge game changer. It's the 8th day, because it was led up to by 7, but it's in a different realm. And it's in the same realm as eating kosher, engaging the world with divine consciousness. The account of the final 8th day of the installation rites, when the divine presence openly descended to earth, inspires us to yearn for the ultimate revelation of God's presence on earth, the final redemption. The laws of permitted and forbidden animals, which express the ideal of transforming reality into a vehicle for divine consciousness, give us both the tools to actualize this ideal, as well as a foretaste of the true transformation of nature into divine consciousness that will occur with the final redemption. So that's the overview. We'll go next week. We'll go further into the installation rites. Unless there are any questions, doesn't sound like it. I wish you all someone say
I
something?
was just gonna,
Sure.
I was just gonna comment that I don't need the text on Zoom, because either I'm on my computer and so I can open it up in a window next to it, or I'm on my phone, in which case I can't read it anyway, it's so small. So
Okay, if anybody wants, just let me know. I could do it, but thanks for that, Debbie. And
I'll take it. I'll take it, Mendy.
to bring it up, we can read it on the screen as
yeah,
well. Fine.
I mean, I guess we could try it a couple times, see.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
I do it Sunday with the things, go up and down. I
It's
like
easier to follow you
okay.
for me, being a senior these days. I'm not as young as Debbie.
Nor am I.
Please.
Barely.
So
Anyways.
I'm going to. All right. So wish everyone a wonderful Labor Day weekend. And God willing, if I remember, next week I'll try and put it as a split screen. It's sort of when we're reading. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.